What we're doing today is this resume workshop, which specifically for the School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. First thing we're going to cover is just the purpose of resume. You probably are already aware, but really it's there to introduce your qualifications and your skills to the employers. It's a way for you to outline details in an easy to read format. You want to tell your career story. And remember, it's a representation of you. The first thing you should include in your resume is your education. You need to give a full representation of your educational experience, including your graduation date. That helps when employers are looking at your resume to quickly know when you're going to be available, whether you're looking for a full-time position or an internship. You also want to list the degree that you're pursuing currently and if you have any prior degrees. So if you're getting your Bachelor of Arts or your Bachelor of Science, you want to include that. Plus, if you have transferred from a community college, you can include that too. Typically, you only include your high school until about the end of your sophomore year of college. If you're doing a minor, please include that. And I like it personally when you identify the School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. So you'll say University of Maryland, College Park, School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. And GPA, I like to tell you to include it if it's like a 3.4 or over, because that shows that you have some really good schoolwork behind you. If you have Dean's List, any kind of other awards, note those too. Sometimes they can be noted in the education section, and sometimes they can be noted at the end in the, if you do like an honors or awards section, depending on how much you actually have. The next thing we do is we list our experience. Typically, you list everything chronologically in reverse order. You include the position titles and the dates. The dates are kind of important. Instead of just using the years, I think it's important to include the months, particularly if it's an architecture internship or a summer internship for a different field, because it shows, you know, whether you have 1 month experience there or 3 months, and it makes a difference. Include bullet points for each job. So the bullet points, this is where this can vary a little bit depending on what the job is. Obviously, you want to include more bullet points for a job that's relevant to the job that you're applying to. And then fewer, you could just do a brief synopsis or a summary of a job if it's, say, working at a restaurant or, you know, child care. You want to start with action verbs, but don't overuse verbs. Try not to use the same verb over and over and over again. And ensure tense is consistent. You want to use present tense for current jobs, and past experience, use past tense. Including your skills and interests, you want to list any skills that are relevant to the potential employer. You want to highlight your technological skills and include in bullets if possible. So what I'm saying here is say you have AutoCAD experience. I like to see it listed under the skills that you have AutoCAD. And then if you did an internship and you did some kind of design using AutoCAD, I would include it there. It means more to the employer that they could see that you've used it in a real life experience. Highlight your language skills. More and more, this is becoming more important to employers. So I would list whatever languages that you are fluent in, or even if it's a basic knowledge of it. Include interests that you do in your spare time. I think sometimes, especially if there's space in your resume, it's something that gives you a conversation that you can talk to your interviewer with. And I like when you include the education abroad. People who come to our career fair in particular are usually our alumni, and they understand how important it is. So they like to talk about the education abroad, and it's a vital experience. It's a vital part of your experience in our program. And a lot of times you'll do education abroad in lieu of a summer internship, so it's good to include it. Resume layout. Now that is where, hold on one second, I'm just gonna check and see if there's anybody else in the waiting room. Okay. Sorry. So resume layout is important, and there's 1,000 different ways you can do it. You can use the traditional layout where you just list everything that you can look on the University of Career Center, but architects in particular generally have a little bit more of a design feature to it. No matter what you do, you want to make sure it's easy to read and that there's clear organization. You want to see if there's graphic hierarchy and graphic consistency. It is a lot if you want to make sure that you use the same font, or you can vary the size, but you don't want to use too much font, or you don't want to take too much away from the content of your resume. And I would recommend limiting your resume to 1 page, particularly since you're a student. There's always exceptions to these rules, but if you can limit it to 1 page, it's the best. Even though I said you want to use reverse chronological order, if you have different experience in different things in different fields, you want to include the most relevant experience you're applying for first. So there are different ways that you can lay it out, and I'm happy to work with you one-on-one to do that. But if you say worked as an architecture intern for 2 summers, but you went away for education abroad this summer, so it's not the most recent chronologically, I would still put that first. Keep in mind that resume reviewer typically only use about 18 seconds to look at each resume when they're going through a number of them, especially if you mail them in or upload them. So you want to keep in mind with the short review time that you want to make the most important things stick out. All right, other notes. Please use a professional email. The good news is we all have UMD emails, and I would recommend using those while you're a student, but you can use a personal one if you like, but make sure it's something usually with your first name, last name. Don't use some kind of, crazy description that you've had since you were, 16. You want to make sure it's a professional email. Objectives. We've all seen objectives on resumes. Sometimes I think they can be beneficial, especially if you have a career change, if you have something specific that you're looking for. But I'm not a huge fan of objectives that just say, I'm a current student in planning and I'm looking for a planning position, or I'm a current student in architecture, I'm looking for an architecture position. If you're going to use up the space, the valuable space on your resume, you want to make sure that the objective says something personal about you. Otherwise, you can just include it in your cover letter. Contact information, I recommend you could put your name, a cell phone, an email, and then you can put your address if you'd like. Thing about address, if you are not from the Maryland area, you can put both of your addresses, your school address and your local address, especially if you're applying. So if you are looking for a job in New York and you're originally from New York, it's beneficial for you to put that address so that they know that you'll be moving back there. But sometimes, because of space limitations, you don't even need to use your address any longer. I think that an email and a cell phone is appropriate at this point. An important thing to remember is that you really want to tailor your resume to the job that you're applying for. It's so easy just to have one resume for everything, and you can send it out if you're looking for a part-time position here or if you're looking for a full-time position. But you want your resume and that short little space that you have to really show the experience that makes you fit the job that you're applying for. So it's really beneficial, especially first-time job seekers when you graduate, to make sure that your resume highlights what you're looking for and shows the strongest experience. So you might have one resume for an architecture internship or an architecture job that you drop off some of your leadership experience if it's not relevant, or and then you might use that if you're looking for a different kind of job. If you don't have a lot of relevant work experience, you can highlight coursework. And if you highlight the coursework, I really recommend, I've seen it nicely where they'll put education and then put some relevant coursework. And this is where you can show, like if you take the BIM course, that you have BIM experience, or what studios you've been in, or if you're in community planning and you haven't had a community planning job, I would highlight the relevant coursework. Including volunteer work is always beneficial, particularly if you have a leadership role. So there's no work for something you haven't gotten paid, you can still list it. And if you have a leadership role, that's even better. And then join student organizations. I cannot stress enough how this will set you apart if you could put it on your resume. So if you're say an undergraduate architecture student and you have no architecture experience, but you have other relevant experience that you want to list, or just experience, because it's good to show that you have, sometimes it shows that you can multitask if you can juggle a job and schoolwork. So I'm not saying don't list your work, but if you join student organizations and take a leadership role, then that shows that you're committed to your future. All right, I'm going to go through some of the things that are less effective for resumes. You don't want an over-designed resume. It is really, really tempting to try to make yourself stand out. And You want something that is different perhaps, but you want to make sure that you get the relevant information. You don't want to lose your content because you've over-designed it. And over-designing really means that sometimes including too many graphics. It's tempting to just use a number of graphics to be representative of different things. And while you think you're being clever, it becomes problematic. It could become problematic, and take away from your content. So remember, in your resume, content is really what you're going for. You have to remember whenever you do your resume that you want to save it as a PDF. I also recommend emailing your resume to yourself. So attach it, email it, open it, print it, see what it looks like. I can't tell you how many people send me resumes to take a look at, and usually they haven't saved it as PDF, but you want to make sure that the graphic that you work so hard on actually shows up and prints the way you want it to. Ranking. It has become popular by many people to rank their skills. I find it problematic in a number of different ways. Number one, I've read more and more articles and talked to professionals and say that, especially when you're in school, it's hard for you to rank yourself. And so they're not really sure how relevant it is. Also, ranking, usually you're going to list a number of things and you're not going to list yourself as a 10 and everything. So what it automatically does is it draws your eye to the thing that you're less skilled at. I'd much prefer that you either list all the skills and then you can talk about it when you go to the interview, what you are best at or most proficient at, but I would not rank it. You don't want a resume that's overcrowded. And you don't want a resume that contains unnecessary personal information. You don't have to specify, you don't need a photo, you don't need to specify your birth date. Personal information is not necessary. Let's look at a few examples. So this is actually, was a former student, and I like this one because I think that it is nice to look at. She includes a lot of information. She lists her important jobs in reverse chronological order. I don't know if you could see, she highlights where she worked here. Like she did the draft of the floor plans in AutoCAD. And then she also puts the AutoCAD down here. I'm going to point out this is a really good resume. However, this is a pet peeve of mine. You have to make sure if you're going to list something as a skill that you are listing it the way that it is supposed to be written. So AutoCAD here should really be lower, CAD should be uppercase. What I do when I look at all of these is I Google pretty much every time because it's hard to remember which one's which to make sure that it's all correct. So just double check your resume to make sure that everything is spelled correctly. She also lists her organizations. She lists here her awards, which she has. The Girl Scout Gold Award is a good one, even though it's not relevant to architecture. It shows long-term commitment. I think she listed advanced, proficient, beginner. I'm not even sure that was necessary, but I think the layout looks nice. And you can see here, she lists her study abroad semester. If she had less experience, then she probably could have given more weight to the study abroad experience and put it maybe in between education and experience. But she has a fair amount of experience, so I think it's effective the way it is. This is another one that I like. This is for someone who has a Bachelor of Science. So you'll see she lists both of her minors. She lists her semester abroad. She lists her internship positions. She includes what she used while she was in there. She lists that she was the secretary for this organization, which is great. She lists her honors. If you win something with studio projects, you want to make sure you include it. And then here she lists all of her skills. We're going to take a look now at I pulled these off of the internet. So this, I think, is an example of one that is far too over-designed. And she also includes way too much personal information. So She includes her birth date, which is unnecessary. She has a photo, which I also think is unnecessary. If you want to put something, I think it's better use of your space to make some kind of a personal logo or something that you can carry on all the way through. You can use it on your cover letter. You can use it on your portfolio if you have one. You can use it on your thank you letter. So I think a logo is nice, and it's a good use of graphics. You can see here, she lists her software skills and ranks it, which immediately you can see that she feels less strong in Autodesk and InDesign. And the interest here, I think it's just too much. Now this resume, actually, I mean, I like parts of it, and part of it is easy to read. But here she lists the skills, and this is actually a huge pet peeve of mine, and I see it over and over again, where people will rank themselves lower on creativity or problem solving. Why? You do not want to put it out there that you think you are not creative. Creativity should be one of your strengths. It's better just to leave the whole ranking thing off. I do like that she has the languages. I would not, again, I would just list them. I wouldn't rank them. You can't see this, but this has some grammatical and some spelling errors, and I can't stress enough how important it is to take the data out of, if you're going to put it in some kind of program like this to design it, take it out, put it in a Word doc, spell check, double check, check it again, give it to someone else to check, because some people are going to get 100 resumes for one job. And if they see a number of typos, then they might just set your resume away, and they'll never even take a look at the next, your cover letter or your portfolio. Okay, last thoughts. I think it's very helpful to keep a master document with all your experience. Take something, keep it. Every time you get a new position, every time you get an award, anything you can think of, go ahead and add it and just keep it. And then when you need to make a specific resume for a position, then you can go through, pick out what's relevant and add it. The exceptions to the rules, the grouping, I would really highlight grouping your experience and maybe throwing away the reverse chronological order for that one time. Your strongest leaving school, I would highlight your education, then I would highlight your relevant experience, and then if you have in reverse chronological order, and then if you have other experience that's maybe not relevant but you want to list, I would do that separately. And as always, you can contact me if you need any help. I mean, I'm available. You can email me, we can make it over a phone call, or we can do it over Zoom. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if anybody has any questions.
I have a question. For a resume, does it always have, or should it, or I don't know how to say this, should the style reflect the portfolio style as well? Like, should they visually be connected?
They should be. I mean, they don't have to be identical, but I think it's nice if there's some kind of consistency. So maybe your cover letter or your cover of your portfolio can have something that matches your resume. It doesn't have to be. I mean, you could just use a consistent font, but it looks nicer if it's somehow consistent. And then I would follow it up. And if you do a thank you card after an interview, using a card with that logo on it would be nice too. Because even though we're in the world of digital, although now that everybody's working from home, I don't know where you'd send it. So maybe that's out the door. But yeah, I like it to have consistency.
And then my second question is about experiences from past careers. I worked in the STEM field before switching to architecture, and I spent about 4 years in a lab as a lab manager. And I'm just wondering, how much of that experience should I reflect in my resume?
So what I would start with, I would write it down, figure out what you have, and then pick out what you think is the most relevant to the job description for you're applying for. Or if you're just doing for a regular, I think a STEM field, especially being a lab manager, I think there's a lot of relevance in there and a lot of carryover, especially if you have project management. You want to show project management, communication. Anything they've already seen that you can have successfully worked somewhere before you came back and went back to get because I'm assuming you're getting a graduate degree, correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that it's beneficial, and particularly if you're looking for, I know that there are some architecture firms that specialize in lab work, and I don't know if that's something you'd be interested in, but for those companies in particular, I think it would be beneficial. But I recommend for you, I mean, go ahead and throw together what you have and then send it to me and we can make a quick appointment to go over it.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else?
I just had one question. I know that some portfolios incorporate a resume into the whole portfolio. I don't know if it's better to have that separate, like two separate documents, or together.
More and more, I mean, I would have it both ways. I mean, you can have it, you can embed it in your portfolio if you'd like. If I've seen it both ways. So the one thing to remember, if you don't embed it in your resume, I mean, your portfolio, to make sure that you have contact information on your portfolio. Sometimes it depends on the job that you're applying for. They'll tell you, they'll have specifications on how you upload your resume versus your portfolio. And sometimes there's a size limit. So if the resume part of your portfolio is going to bump your size over what you need to attach, then I would take it out. But I've seen it really nicely done both ways. So I think it's more of a preference. It also depends how big your portfolio is. So if you have a ton of projects and a lot of experience, then I would probably leave the resume out and have it separate.